Good.
Yep.
Perfect. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the new event for the architect community in Madrid. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will talking about Salesforce Well Architect. So, welcome everyone. So, what is the schedule for today? So I told you today we talking about how we can make a simple and adaptable and reliable design. So that the name is the Salesforce Well Architect Frameworks. And after we can have the Q&A. So for example, do you have any questions for during the presentation? You can have the questions in the chat, please. So for the finish the event, we have community information we want to share with you. So in the organization, organization by Bárbara García, she is a business analyst architect, and myself, Sara Hernandez, I am a senior Salesforce consultant with together leadership the community. And today we have two special guests, and we're talking about the Salesforce Well Architect. She is Susannah K. Plaisted, is the pronunciation? I don't know.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And she is a lead evangelist in architect relationship in Salesforce. And Tom Leddy.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. He is a principal evangelist in the same team architect relationship. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. I appreciate your time. So we can start for the topic.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having us. We're really thrilled to be here and so excited to see that there are more architect groups, especially architect groups all around the world. And this new architect group in Madrid is amazing. So thank you so much. And thank you to Sarah and Barbara, the leaders, and to all of you for joining us this evening or wherever you are, morning, afternoon, evening. And so I'll just very briefly introduce myself. My name is Susannah Plaisted. I'm Colombian by birth, and I grew up in the United States, which is why I sound like I do. But I am here in the south part of the United States. So I live in South Carolina, and I've been with Salesforce for about 2 years.
And I'm Tom Leddy. I'm part of the architect relations team as well. I'm in Chicago, so the northern part of the United States, and I've been with Salesforce for about actually almost 5 years.
And we are pumped to be talking about Salesforce Well Architected, and no Salesforce presentation is complete without the forward-looking statement slide. So this is just your reminder to make your purchasing decisions based on what's available in our products today and not based on anything that we might say in this presentation. And now that that is out of the way, Tom and I are part of a larger team, actually. It's not just us on architect relations. We have it's a relatively small team in the Salesforce world, right? We have a team of 5. And some of you might see some familiar faces on this slide. Our fearless leader is Zane Turner, who is the director of architect relations. Mark Braga, who's next on the slide, is our director of technology. And you just met me and Tom, and then Marissa is another wonderful member of our team who helps manage some of our products. So this is the team, and what we do, we wanted to start with telling you a little bit about what we do. So yes, well architected, but we've been around as a team for a number of years now, and it started out just with Zane, and then it was Zane and Mark, and over the years we've built more and more, and we've also built more and more with our tooling. So we showed up for the first time when we're talking about TDX is coming up, right? We started out at having an event space for the first time actually in 2018. And then in 2019, we Dreamforce, where we had our first space on the Dreamforce floor with these nice whiteboards, and people got to design their solutions, and it was a lot of fun. And then in 2020, it was a huge year for us where we launched the Architect Digital Home, which is architect.salesforce.com. And all of the resources we're going to talk about today are all on that website. So if you haven't check out architect.salesforce.com. In 2021, we released one of our first products beyond the website, which is Salesforce Diagrams. And again, if you haven't heard of Salesforce Diagrams, definitely encourage you to check it out on our website. It's a quick way to build really beautifully branded diagrams to better communicate your solutions. And then last year in 2022, we introduced Salesforce Well Architected, and that is what we're here to spend the rest of the time talking about. So Tom, do you want to talk about Salesforce Well Architected at a high level?
Yeah, so Salesforce Well Architected is our framework that we have for architects. And like Susannah said, we launched it right before Dreamforce last year, and we've been doing a lot of promotion for it. If you've been to Dreamforce, you've been to maybe some of our workshops, and you may have heard other people talking about it. And basically what it is, it tells you what health looks like and where to spend your time as an architect. So that is made up of some prescriptive guidance. So it'll help you think about these topics and talk about how should we actually be thinking about this as an architect, and specifically within our Customer 360 platform. And it's organized around creating solutions that are trusted, easy, and adaptable. And we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what all those three things mean. But essentially, we can say that trusted solutions protect stakeholders, easy solutions deliver value to your business quickly, and then adaptable solutions will evolve with your business. And actually, I have a quick note for Sara and Barbara next. So we took a shot at translating some of these slides into Spanish. My Spanish is a CSE, so we'll be happy to share this afterwards. But before you share it out, if you wouldn't mind taking a look through the Spanish slides, and feel free to make any corrections to the wording or anything that was off. But this will be, the content is available in Español as well. También.
Nice. Thank you so much, Tom.
And that's a good, that's a good caveat to say. Just one other note: if anything we're saying, if we're going too fast, or if you have a question about anything we said, happy to repeat it. So please feel free, interrupt us or put in the chat, and we'll.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the one thing, so the term well architected is not really, it's not specific to Salesforce. And maybe even before we launched our framework, you may have heard the term well architected used. There's an AWS well architected, there's a Microsoft Azure well architected, there's a few others. And one of the things that they do is they help you design and deploy workloads. Most of these are these kind of infrastructure as a service cloud substrate providers. And the goal of those frameworks is to really help you optimize spend. So how do I make sure I'm not standing up too many servers or running too many services simultaneously, so that I ended up costing my organization too much money. They have similar looking frameworks. They've got some tools available, and the technical scope is their specific cloud substrate. So AWS Well Architected is specifically about AWS, et cetera. Our Well Architected framework is a little bit different, and I'm going to go through in Español. Ours is a little bit different because Salesforce is not an infrastructure as a service organization. It is, we make enterprise business software. So while the frameworks kind of look similar to some of the other well-architected frameworks out there, what we do is we help you design and roadmap healthy Salesforce solutions that will add value to to the business that you're working with, and then optimize where to spend your time as an architect. And the way that we do that is we've got our framework, which is what launched last year in August. We also have some tools that we're working on that are on our roadmap for this year, still working on specific dates of when things will be available, but there will be some similar tools to what's in the other frameworks coming out. And then the specific scope of ours is the Customer 360 platform. So that would be we call it the core platform of Salesforce. And then in Español. And then what we're going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Susannah, and we can kind of go through some of the specific pillars within Well Architected and take a look at the structure.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, when we say the word framework, as Tom mentioned, it's really a series of white papers that are structured around key topics. And you can see all these topics on the screen. They're grouped under 3 large pillars. So the pillars are trusted, easy, adaptable. And we'll go into some detail in each of these, but the thing to know from the beginning is that all of these topics are in priority order. So we think it's really important to start with trust, and within trust to first, for example, and things on the right side of the screen, like adaptability, are best practices, and that's how to build, the best solution, but you can't have a great solution without starting with trust. On the next slide, we'll uncover a little bit more about what a trusted solution means. So as Tom said, trusted solutions protect the business and stakeholders, but they do that through 3 specific things: secure. So focusing on things like organizational security and session security and data security with all the great tools that we know that we have, things like org-wide defaults and session settings. And we'll give you some even deeper examples in just a little bit. And after security, the next area to think about is compliance. And when we say compliance, we mean that solutions follow legal and ethical guidelines too. So adhering to regulations like the GDPR in the European Union, or ethical standards and accessibility. So making sure that users of all abilities can enter data into your application or can read data in your application. And then the third pillar within this trusted topic is reliability. And this is, I think, a really popular one with our especially. So we want to make sure that your solutions don't just work for a small amount of users, but they work for all different ranges of users when there's lots of data and lots of transactions. And so topics to pay attention to in this section are availability, performance, and scalability. So that's the definition of trusted, but let's take a look at what actually look like in Salesforce and some of the key takeaways that you can learn when you read Well Architected.
All right, and yeah, so some of the things that we cover when we get down into what the white papers actually contain. So for trusted, we can think about authentication and authorization are 2 of the key topics. And when we think about creating Salesforce users based on individuals, not personas, we've all done, well, I don't know if we've all done this. I know I've done it early in my career, and we've all seen this at least once, where somebody creates a user that's just called integration user, and it's used for all of the integrations from any other system. And then it creates a lot of problems with record ownership, and you could even get into issues with data skew if you've got too many integrations and too many records that are owned by that user. So you should really be thinking about users in terms of individuals and not personas that way. But when you think about what users can access, you do want to think about personas for that. And that's where we talk about using things like permission sets and permission set groups, as opposed to giving out access based on individual profiles. And then organization-wide defaults. This has actually been it's generated a lot of discussion about our stance on OWDs, but the way that we are thinking of it is that you should set them to public read only, unless your business has sensitive data that it's dealing with, and then use private. And the reason we actually recommend public read only as a default is, and also specifically for internal OWDs. Externals, private should always be the default, but internally, what you can end up doing is overcomplicating your sharing model if you set everything to private, and then you have to go and create a whole bunch of really unique sharing rules or really granular sharing rules to open up who can see what. You can do, number one, you can overcomplicate your sharing model so much that it'll start to cause performance issues when you do recalculations and things. But also you can get to a point where it suddenly gets next to impossible to keep track of who has access to what data. And sometimes it doesn't even matter, where you've got a record that actually, by the time we open it up to all these different people, this object, they could have just been public anyway, because so many people can see it. So it's really what we're saying here is just make sure you really understand your data and why people do or don't need access to the records in each one of your objects. And then failure mitigation, we talk about classifying your triggers in terms of people, process, and technology. So a lot of times, if there is some type of critical failure in a production system, on the surface, it's almost always going to look like it's a technical issue of, okay, there's this, I need to fix this thing to get my system working again. And maybe you need to do that immediately to fix the immediate issue so your users can get back to work. But there's more than likely, or a lot of times you're going to find that maybe there's an underlying business process issue that you need to change the way people are actually using the system, or maybe there's even a policy issue where you need to think about the way people are even thinking about what they're doing in your system, and you need to make some updates there that will prevent whatever the issue is from happening again. Otherwise, you're going to end up just putting out a bunch of fires repeatedly, and you don't want to be doing that. So, in Espanol, and then we'll hand it back to Susannah to talk about the easy pillar.
Yeah, so trust, I really like this pillar because I think it really differentiates the Salesforce Well Architected framework from other ones, because trust is, the way you administer it and configure it is different no matter what, when you're using different applications. But easy is, I think, incredibly important because that's why we've chosen Salesforce to build instead of using something like AWS or another technology. It's because we've all bought into this idea that when we use Salesforce, right, we can build applications faster and they're easier to maintain. But we know as architects in reality, you can very quickly build a that becomes hard to maintain or that becomes hard to change. And that's why it's important to focus on building easy solutions which deliver value fast. And Well Architected defines an easy solution as something that is simple, automated, and engaging. So simple solutions follow the most direct path in engineering. So this means, not overcomplicating something just because you know how to use a specific tool. Like just because you know how to build, use Apex, maybe it makes sense to use Flow, or the reverse is sometimes true too, right? Just because you are more comfortable in Flow doesn't mean that you should twist yourself into a pretzel or make, do something really complicated just because you want to stick with this one tool. So we think it's really important to think about making solutions simple, focusing on readability. So making sure that it's, to Tom's point, making sure that you can read and really understand what's been built. So it's not overcomplicated. Making sure that it's easy to maintain so that you can make changes, so that folks that, maybe you're an architect that is going to roll off a project and maybe go work with another customer, you want to make sure that what you've built can be maintained by the people that need to live with that solution. And then also simple solutions are, there's intentionality. So you've made those hard decisions. This is Tom's line, I'm stealing it. So you've made those hard decisions for folks so that your solution is easy for people to use. Like that's what we're really saying. We're not saying that you should build only easy solutions, but you've done your job so that your users can easily work with your business application. The next topic within easy is automated. So automated solutions meet goals and objectives faster. And I like this pillar a lot because, we know that you can automate things a ton of different ways with Salesforce. You can automate all the things, but automating everything isn't always going to deliver business value. Just because you've automated something that maybe, one person does once a year, was that really the best investment in your team's time, right? To make a solution well architected for automation, we focus on things like logic and data, so how are transactions being handled within your Flow or within your Apex, and also business value. So making sure that you're automating the right things and that you're measuring the value that your automation brings to the business. And then finally, rounding out this easy pillar is the concept of engaging. So engaging solutions delight users and drive adoption. This is important. It's more than, it might sound a little fluffy. We think of confetti, right? With, making engaging for the user. Let's add confetti. That's not what we mean. So we mean that we want a solution to be engaging by making it streamlined so that users can get what they need out of your application, get their job done faster and easier, and that it actually drives value for them, that it's helpful. It better, and they know how to use this application. So it's, not something that they have to use. It's something that they want to use. So they want to use in the right way so that, all the effort that you put in as an architect is paying off because users are actually using your application in the right way. So now I'll pass it back to Tom to talk a little bit more about what this looks like in Salesforce.
Yes, and we will, yes. So one of the things we talk about with Easy is documentation. And like Susannah said, it was funny. I have a funny story. When we were actually putting the initial version of the feedback together, and we were asking for, or initial version of the framework together, and we were asking for feedback on our drafts, somebody actually mentioned, well, documentation is, it's really hard and it takes a long time to write. And, I don't know if you want to be recommending that. And the truth is, without meaningful documentation, your teams end up wasting a lot of time trying to understand your system the way it is. And I've worked on projects before where we've gone back and had to revisit decisions that were already made 6 months ago because nobody documented it when the decision was made. And everyone's going, wait, what did we say? Why did we do? I remember we talked about this, but I don't. So, keeping things like overviews of your solutions and records of your decisions, and then having good documentation inside of any code that anybody writes is going to be crucial to making sure that your system, that teams can understand your system the way it is. It also makes it easier to hand your solution off to somebody else. So if you're an architect and you're doing a lot of the upfront design, and then you hand something off to an implementation team or a team that's going to be responsible for long-term support, they're not going to be calling you every 5 minutes asking you what something means because they can read it in the documentation. And we also talked about
Comments alone are not documentation. So we had this debate. We did this presentation live somewhere. Someone was like, well, I have code comments, so isn't that enough for my documentation? And no, the answer is no. You need that business perspective. You need the solution overviews, not code.
Yeah, that's a good call. And in fact, I remember that discussion specifically where it was, you need to have good comments in your code, but that can't be the only thing that you're doing. So, and we talk about automation. A lot of people, I think this has actually been, we have internal reports that we can run across all the different orgs that our customers are using. And one of the things that one of our internal teams has found is that SOSL is actually underutilized a lot. And a lot of architects don't even necessarily realize this, that whenever you use SOQL, if you're going to write a SOQL statement, the platform reserves a bunch of resources as if you're going to do a data operation, even if you're not planning to save a record. If all you're doing is retrieving some data that you need to do like a text search or something like that, SOSL is actually going to, over the long run, perform better. If you do need to do something where you're writing data back to the database, absolutely use SOQL for that. But if you know how to use both of those tools and the right times to use them, it can be pretty powerful to be able to do that. And then the other thing is, optimization is not about one automation per object. We actually see this even in some of our existing Salesforce documentation on, some of the old websites that hasn't been updated for a while, that back when we were using Process Builder and had limited options for how we could orchestrate our automations, that actually was good advice. So if 5 years ago, absolutely one automation per object was the way to go. Now there are a lot of tools that are available that will help you orchestrate your automations, and there's Flow Orchestrator, but there's also being able to use subflows and being able to prioritize your record triggered automations by setting the priority for when they execute. And there's a variety of different tools. So rather than try to cram everything into one giant automation that does 27 different things, and then you have to put a bunch of conditional statements to determine what it's going to do, the better approach is to split that up into smaller automations and then learn how to make them work together in the way that you need them to. And then
I feel like there used to be guidance like, well, if you're using code, like continue to use code on that object, don't introduce flow, and the reverse was true. But now, right, there's tools that with flow, invocable Apex, and so using these tools together is much more encouraged and supported and possible than it used to be.
Yeah, in fact, that's actually a nice model where you you can use the flow for your upfront business logic. And then if you do have something that requires code to run behind the scenes or something, you can use that invocable Apex, and using those two tools together and instead of trying to shoehorn everything into one of them, it's like you can use the right tool for the right purpose and make them work with each other. So, and then, yeah, recognition and rewards. So like, kind of like Susannah said, it's not all just about, not everybody wants to see confetti every time they save a record or anything. So when we think about making something engaging, we do want to make sure that that users can recognize their progress, and we want to make sure that if I'm a business user and I'm entering data into a system, I can understand how the work that I'm doing relates to my organization's overall goals, right? So I should know what the KPIs are, and I should have access to things like dashboards and reports that I can easily tell how the work I'm doing, how am I doing? And, am I close to what my own personal goals are and my organization's goals? So a little bit of confetti every once in a while is nice, but it's about a lot more than that. And, making sure that users are getting good feedback for the work that they're doing in the system. And then the next thing we're going to do is talk about adaptable.
Yeah, the final pillar. So the final pillar of Well Architected is adaptable. And this is the most, I would say, it's not abstract, but a little more thought-provoking, I guess, than some of the other topics. So here how a solution can evolve with the business. And we have two sort of sub-components here. The first one is resiliency. And resilient solutions handle change well. So you can handle change with incident response, so making sure that you know how to respond should an incident arise, that your application can resume business as usual, even if something unexpected happens. Also the concept of continuity planning. So if an incident does happen, how will you bring the system back to being operational and deal with maybe that downtime? What's your plan for making sure that the business can continue even when something like that happens? And then finally, resilience has to do with application lifecycle management. So how do you move changes across from your development environments all the way to production? Manage those changes, whether it's code or whether it's declarative configuration. And then composability or composable solutions are the final concern here. And composable solutions adjust quickly and with greater stability. And to do that, composable solutions have a separation of concerns. So we are really thoughtful about how we decouple or separate dependencies with your environment. So you want to make sure that your changes and your environment are not super tightly coupled. So what happens if you don't do this well, where you can't refresh a sandbox, for example, because there's all these dependencies with your data and with your changes, and it's really brittle, or it's very easy to break. So separating these out and instead keeping your changes control and having these environments that you can spin up like a scratch org and then push your code or your configuration to those orgs is a much more stable way to operate. Composable solutions are also integrable, so they have integrability, so they can communicate with each other, and that's not just across different applications, it's within an application too. So how can you create different units for maybe your different business units and share some resources, but have different resources separate, because you want to make sure that each business unit can operate independently. And then the final concept here is packageability. So this has to deal with, are you using things like unlocked packages? How are you moving those changes from maybe environment to environment or organization to organization? And how can you do this in a way that's really, really stable and quick to release?
And yeah, some of our learnings from Adaptable. So application lifecycle management. The first one, it's a pretty big one that I know a lot of organizations are still using this way to move changes between environments, but really, you stop using change types and doing org-based development. And especially now that DevOps Center is in GA, it used to be a fair point that a lot of organizations maybe aren't mature enough to really understand packaging, and they've got a small team, and I kind of get that, and that's fine. Obviously, if you know enough about packaging and you know how to get a development team thinking that way, that's great. But even if not, DevOps Center is a lot better than using change steps the way that we used to, and keeping your code using source control instead of just leaving it in your orgs and then essentially having your production system become the source of truth for all of your latest metadata. Keeping it separately in a source control system it's a lot safer, and it's going to make it a lot easier to recover from issues, which is what we talk about in Resilient. And then composability, some of these things, Susannah kind of covered what's in this diagram here, that it's the way to be thinking about what's in your org. So if you have different business units that have different requirements, how do you want to separate out the functionality that you're going to use, so that if you move changes into production to meet some requirements for one part of your business, how do you make sure they're not going to affect the other parts of your business? And if you have to back something out really quickly, you're not going to disrupt a bunch of people's work. And and then how do those things work together? So integrability, interoperability, it's how do these, as you're thinking of separating things up into different units, how do you make sure that those units can share the data that they need to share while still being able to operate independently? So we cover a lot of that. And then packageability is the same thing. One of the benefits of being able to use packages is that you can package things up and move them into a production org and kind of do what we said, where we're separating out the concerns for the different business units. But also, if you really design your packages the right way, you might even have a multi-org scenario where you can install the same package into multiple orgs and deliver the same functionality to different teams that are even using different orgs. And one of the interesting things, I've actually, this is the last concept that we talk about in Well Architected, but I have had a few questions when I've given this presentation before, where people have asked about, well, how do we know how to do some of that? And a lot of it is, it's going to be different for every organization, because it has to do with the way your business is structured, and which different departments are using Salesforce and how they're using it, and, what's the same versus what's different. But what we do cover in Well Architected is at least an approach you can take, and then the final decisions about how you divide the things up are still going to be individual based on your organization. But what the hope is that we'll have at least here's how you should be thinking about this as an architect and approaching it.
We have our first question, Tom. I don't know if you want to answer right now or after the presentation.
Oh, we can do it now. So
DevOps Center is compatible with Velocity right now, or they have to use another tool to deploy Velocity?
Yeah. I would answer like this. So DevOps Center supports moving any metadata, right? That's a part of a given Salesforce org, so that's installed to an org. So with Velocity, anything that's metadata, so I know there are aspects that are metadata, and then I believe there's configuration that's actually data that's part of Velocity. Yeah. So you could move the metadata, but for the data, you would need to use a different tool to do that. Yeah, is my understanding.
Yeah, and if you use Velocity, or Salesforce Industries tools a lot, you'll actually see what Susannah just said, where some of the way that you configure some of the tools are actually by updating records. And we're in the process, our product teams are working on migrating all of that over so that everything is metadata that you would go into setup. But some of that is, it's taking a little while. And we also have to be aware of the fact that there are some customers that are already using the system that way and have done configuration. So it's kind of like a balancing act, but to Susannah's point, anything that is metadata you can use with DevOps Center, and then the record-based configuration that's almost like moving data between two orgs. Like you might have to export it and import it into the target system. So. And I think, what's next? So the next thing, so I know Sarah mentioned you are going to be at TDX. If anybody else is going to be at TDX, we would love you to join us for our Well Architected workshops. And we also have a couple of great breakout sessions that we're going to be talking about a day in the life of an architect. And we've got another session where you'll actually get to give feedback on the current framework if you've used it before. So we'd love to see you at all of those. And then we have some videos available on our Salesforce Architects YouTube channel as well.
Nice.
I think that's our last slide. I think we just have a thank you left. Maybe we have a link to it.
Actually, yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Although we, yeah.
So yeah, if there were links all along, and but I think as we said at the beginning, all of this is available on architect.salesforce.com. So if you want to read more, if that's more of your, that's how you learn. There's tons of, the white papers are very dense. I'll put a disclaimer there. There's a lot of great content and it's all on the Architect website. And as Tom pointed out, we also have some more bite-sized YouTube videos if you would rather get up to speed that way.
Okay.
And
Thank you so much.
so much, Tom and Susannah. For us, it has been an amazing talk with you today and an amazing event. I am very excited because I really love all the framework and all the Salesforce best practices too. And I don't know, we don't have any questions in chat, so maybe we can use our icebreaker questions that we have to ask you right now. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first one is, if you are doing a refactor of a very unreliable and complex org, what should be the first thing that we need to focus on? What is your recommendation about?
Yeah, so I would start, oh.
Oh, no, right. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, to start just from, very basic, I would definitely use Well Architected's order of priority.
Yeah.
And identify any issues with trust that might exist, because I think that those would be the most important to address. So anything with security, any security, risks or gaps that you might see, and down to any compliance or scalability issues, anything that's going to disrupt security, I would definitely start. Yeah,
I would agree. And there's and speaking of that, we mentioned this kind of early on in the presentation, but just in case, just to mention it again, these topics are arranged in order of, how you should prioritize your time. So like Susannah said, trust and security are the first things you would look at. Is, what does your security model look like? Do all of your users really have the access they need? Do you have the right, are you giving out access correctly? And then, you can start looking at some of the things like compliance, because there might be legal reasons why you have to do things a certain way. And then from there,
if you aren't sure, if you aren't sure what good looks like, if you aren't sure what question to ask, if you go into any of the white papers, if we open, there's a section with patterns and anti-patterns for whatever topic it is. So for organizational security, for example, you can see looking for these things in your documentation. So for authentication, it says approved security personas are clearly listed in your documentation. So if that's something that's missing, that's an area to focus on. And then on the other side of the screen, you can see that the patterns. So especially for an existing implementation, these are things you can see, do we have these anti-patterns in our org? And if so, maybe we should make a plan to address those. So that's definitely a good first place to start as well.
And that's a good point, that all of these white papers are organized the same way, where the first thing we have is an introduction that gives you an overview of here's what this topic is, here's why it's important to you as an architect. And then we go into these subsections where we provide, this is more of what we call the prescriptive guidance, which is here's how you should be thinking about this topic. And then at the end of each section, there's a table just like this one. And we can kind of see on the menu on the right-hand side that now it has these patterns and anti-patterns of here's what you should be looking for that you can actually see within an org. and here's what you should be looking for that you hopefully do not see in your org, or maybe you need to stop and think about refactoring something or updating them. And then at the very bottom of each one, we have 2 additional tables. One has some relevant tools that have, these are things that you can physically use within your org to improve, security in this case, but it would be whatever is relevant, whichever white paper you're looking at. And then the last table has resources, which are, they're not necessarily things you can use in your org, but they're links to documentation and anything else where you might be able to go even a little bit deeper than what we specifically cover in the framework. So.
Awesome. Thank you. So please don't hesitate to ask to the creators of the framework. So you have an amazing opportunity to ask. Let me check. Okay, we can go with the second one. Sometimes one of the hardest things to see or to find with scalability is how to measure when you are doing an oversized solution. Do you have any reference that we can take advantage of to measure this? To try to identify when we are doing an oversized solution.
Oversized
So
in the sense. Go ahead.
Ask a clarifying question. I think that's good.
Yeah, oversized in the sense that it's
yes, maybe what we really need is a screen flow with one screen to ask about the name, but then we build a super Lightning Web component to ask only about the name and last name for a contact, So we are oversizing a solution because what we really need is a screen flow with 2 fields. So how to measure this? I don't know if you have some tips to try to detect or to measure when we are doing an oversizing solution.
Yeah, I would definitely lean into the easy pillar of well architected. So making sure that you're thinking about like how someone's going to maintain whatever you're building. And also like probably the biggest thing is to follow the most direct path or the simplest path in engineering. So that means that's literally that, right? That's saying like, don't use, an overly complex thing when all the business needs is, this to meet their requirements. And I think the only way to really get there is to focus, instead of like focusing on the technology, instead of being like, I just learned how to code in LWC, so I want to use that. It's like, no, what's the business requirement that we're trying to solve for? And then what's the fastest way, the most maintainable way to deliver that? And then Tom has something good up here too.
And I think one of the other things to keep in mind as you're thinking through designs, or if you have a team of people that are working on designs and you're responsible for approving them, or wherever you're at, it's any code that you write has the potential to turn into technical debt, even if it's only 1 or 2 lines. It's all it takes is the next release, Salesforce comes out with some kind of equivalent functionality that you've built a customization for, and now you have to decide like, okay, do we back this out and then go through all the change management and spend money to have our users learn how to do it the standard way, or do we keep this customization that we built in, and long term, when Salesforce continues to enhance their functionality, we're not going to be able to take advantage of it because we have this customization that we built. And it's when you're thinking about your solutions and not making them too big like that, that's actually something that you should always keep in mind, is how much customization is it going to require to build this. And I can tell you, I've personally, when I think about really early in my career and some of the things that make me cringe now that I used to do, that was something that I used to think like, oh, I'm going to put all this cool stuff and my business users are going to discover it and they're going to think I'm amazing because I gave them all these great features that they didn't even ask for. And then 90% of the time, either they never even figure out that they can do whatever the thing was or they do and they're not as impressed with it as I thought they were, or whatever. And then, but now that I've built that into my solution, it just kind of sits there, and then it has to be maintained, and it's more expensive, and I have to do this. So it's I think one of the other things is, before anything really gets as far as where it's in production, is make sure your stakeholders are really, you're communicating really well back and forth, and making sure that your business users really want the things that you're delivering, or your team is delivering to. So.
And also, like, on the same, maybe like on the flip side of the coin, also delivering exactly what the business user is asking for, like word by word or literally, because sometimes the true need or the true problem that you're trying to solve for isn't to create a form that has a field on the left-hand side of the screen and another field on the right-hand side of the screen that looks like this. It's like, what are they actually trying to do with it? Like earlier on in my career, I would take that requirement and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna like do the best job that I can, and I'm gonna give them exactly what they're looking for, and if that requires that, then obviously is the need to have one field on the left side of the screen and one on the right a big enough demand, right? Or is it going to take on the additional risk of creating a new custom screen or whatever it is, as opposed to using fields have to be like this maybe, but you're also going to get to use all the awesome stuff that comes with leveraging a native Salesforce capability. Maintain your own forever and ever.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Of the system, either we can build this thing in like 5 minutes, where we use the standard tools that are available, or we can spend a bunch of extra time and money because you want this one field to be over here when that's not where Salesforce would normally put it using the default functionality, right? So, yeah.
Awesome. And the third one, because we don't have any more questions right now, do you have any strategy or advice to keep us adhering to best practices while migrating functionality? This is related with the workflows and process builder migration to flows, and now from profiles to permission sets.
The admin team has actually put together some great resources around how to think. So I think for architects, it's more around like, how do you think about these concepts? Like, how do you think about your strategy for migrating profiles to permission sets, just as an example. And the advice that I've heard from Cheryl Feldman, let's see if I get this right. If not, I'll put the link to it in the chat as well. But it's to think about making your permission sets like the different jobs, like the things like I need to be able to manage contracts or update contracts. Like those are the unique pieces of things that should be permission set. Permission set groups should be those groups of the different jobs to be done, and those should really personas. A contract manager might be your permission set group, but the individual jobs to be done might be update contracts, and that's important because those different little pieces can be shared between multiple personas. With new capabilities, right, you can even mute permissions within permission set groups. So it's important to get that granular with these different permission sets themselves so that you can take advantage of all of the flexibility that comes with the groups and muting and all of that.
Thank you. And that's, yes, we don't have any more questions. So thank you so much again for joining us to this meeting and to give this meeting and share with us all your knowledge and your framework. And that's it. Thank you so much and have a good day. And you will see Sara in San Francisco next week, maybe.
Yes.
So I will
Absolutely,
send you a big hug with her.
Thank you so much, Tom and Susannah.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining. Yes.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Good. Amazing information. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.